Coming to tonight's session on plan, execute, and measure. Key ingredients to product success. Let me give an introduction to our esteemed and admired speaker of tonight, Uday Shanker. With over 14 years of experience in fintech industry, Uday has worked in multiple fields like treasury, hedge fund administration, technology, and been associated with firms like IndusInd Bank, Morgan Stanley, and Ashisian. He has a wide array of experience in different arms of finance, business process management, process improvement, software development, and product management. A chartered accountant by qualification, a certified Lean Six Sigma green belt, and an ardent cricketer, he believes that learning is a continuous journey and curiosity is its fuel. A very warm welcome to you, Uday. We are thrilled to have you here with us tonight. Handing the session over to you.
Thank you, Shama. Are you able to see and hear me?
Yes, I can see you and hear you. You can share the screen as well.
Thanks for the lovely introduction and a warm welcome to all the participants. Firstly, congratulations that you've taken an hour from your busy schedules on a Wednesday evening. Some of you, the workday might still be going, and for some, it's probably an hour away from the post-work activities that you might be doing. So thanks a lot for joining. Before we proceed, and I have a deck that I can take you through to share some of my experiences on this topic, I would also like to share a bit about my journey in product. So as Shama mentioned, I'm a chartered accountant by qualification, and I'm often asked this question: what is a chartered accountant doing building softwares? And so let me take you through this journey a bit. So I passed out in 2006, and then I joined IndusInd Bank in Treasury, worked there for some time, and then moved to Morgan Stanley in their fund administration division, where I worked in the business operations mainly for 5 years, learned the business, the clients, the industry. But somewhere at the back of my mind, I was having this urge of how do I increase my scope of impact? Like what can I do that I can enlarge this influence? And I also realized that technology was at the core of how we were delivering value to business customers and how it was a change agent, so to say. So realizing that, I raised my hand to move to the product development team. And I'm thankful to those leaders who put faith in me, someone who hadn't done product management earlier, and give me a chance. And since then, I've been in this product management space, and it's been really an amazing journey since then. So that's a little bit of background of how I reached where I am today. And we also, before we go into the deck, I would ask Shama to maybe launch a quick poll to understand who have joined us today, to understand the mix of audience that we have.
Sure, I'll share the poll right away.
Okay, so the majority of you are already working in product management space, so that's great. And some of you are from aspiring to move to product management, and some are in technology and other space, but interested in product management as a discipline. So let's move. I'll share my deck. Okay, Shama, is it?
Yes, we can see your screen.
All right, great. All right, so first thing first. So a disclaimer that everything that I'm saying in this presentation or during the webinar are my personal views based on my experience and what I've read and understood from or learned from other leaders. And those do not represent any of my previous or present organization. So today's topic is plan, execute, and measure. So in this, and how these are the key ingredients to product success. So planning, product planning is in Wikipedia defined as ongoing process, articulating the market requirement that defines the product feature set. Now, there are two key things here. One, it's an ongoing process. And second, that it's about articulating the market requirement. So in other words, the the customers, like what the customers want, what their problems are, what their needs are. So now, before we dive into more into product planning, let's try and launch another quick poll to gauge what do we really focus on at the planning stage. Shama, if you can launch the poll.
Yes, give me a minute. Audience, as we progress with the session, please feel free to put your thoughts in the chat window, and me or Uday can check it out and we can answer them at a later point.
So I see most of you have selected that it's most important to focus on the problem or the opportunity statement. And that's where even I completely agree that problem is most important area to focus on. So this slide I will not go into great lot of detail in this slide, but just to give a picture of the product planning uh, is a long and complex process, and it goes through multiple hoops. There are different teams involved. You have product team, you have engineering team, you have sales and marketing and finance and business strategy. So a whole host of people come together when we plan a product and launch it. But today we'll focus on what's the most critical aspects for the product management team or the product team to focus on. And in my view, these two are product vision and product roadmap. So let's look into each one of those one by one. So product vision. What does a product vision tells us? It really is the what part. What do you want to build? What do you want to create? Or in other words, what is the problem that you want to solve? And in order to understand that, it's also important for you to study your customers, prospective customers, and understand what problems are they grappling with, what are on top of their mind, and which problem is something that you want to pick and solve for them. The other important aspect here is when you are at the design table, when you're putting together the vision of what you will build, it's also important to urge the temptation of getting into too much. So what not to build is equally important as what to build. And oftentimes we are lured by new trends, next cool thing, and all of that. So all that is fine, but you always have to come back and balance that. What does it really help me achieve, and what problem do I want to solve for the customer? So when we are at the product vision stage, right, it's very important to identify two things. A, identify the right problem, right? So they say that every problem has a solution, but every problem is not worth solving. So we have to, in product management, we have to spend a lot of our time and focus in understanding clearly what the problem is and what we want to solve. And the second aspect of it is spend a great deal of time in understanding the problem. So Albert Einstein once said that if I have 1 hour to solve a problem, I'll spend 55 minutes understanding the problem. And it's pretty elementary. I mean, some of you may argue and say, hey, this is what my 10th grade teacher told me before the board exams. Read all the questions carefully and make sure that you understand the problem, because once you do that, you're most likely to solve it. It is pretty elementary, but so is product management. Product management need not be very complex. You do a lot of basic things right, and you can pull it off. So once you've pinpointed on the problem, you also have to then look at who your customers are, what are their pain points, what their typical day look like, what are their worries, how they spend most of their time and energy on. And There's one more angle to look at, is that usually a product does not have like it's used by different kind of customers. Like, to give an example, let's say we are building an analytical tool, or let's say we are building a dashboard. The analyst who has to actually execute tasks, his main viewpoint would be, hey, excuse me, his main point would be that, okay, what are the tasks that I need to execute? Can I quickly get on with it? Can you tell me what's pending and what's done? At the same time, the manager's view would be, hey, how much have we gone through in the day? Like, where we are we getting any potential delays, or are we on track? And at the same time, a more senior level, maybe department head, would want to understand how the trends were, and to analyze, is something being consistently late, or there is a consistent problem, and how they can solve it. So same sort of tool, different customers and different requirements. So we need to understand who all are going to use the tool. And in product parlance, we call it user persona. So you have to really build user personas. You have to really understand who all will be the users, and then accordingly you have to sort of solve their problem, or think about it. So key here is to listen to your customers and listen to their problems. But then I would also say, listen to your customers, but don't let the customer dictate the solution. So this is interesting, because on one hand, you want to empathize with the customer, you want to understand what their pain points are. But on the other hand, you have to stop them from moving into the solution zone. That's not mainly for the clients to solve. You'll rarely find client and customer, with no disrespect to them, coming up with very good solution that is scalable, solution that is viable. In fact, there are times when you'll see a customer is not really able to tell what the problem is, not being able to put the finger where the problem is. At best, what they're telling you are symptoms. So you have to scratch the surface and go beyond, and then look for what really is the problem. So that is another important aspect, that we should not let the customer dictate the solution, but rather bring them back to the problem. Why do you want this solution? What is it that do you want to do that you are unable to do? How this next feature that you're asking is going to help you deal with it? And there's so much we can discover during this process, which will tell a lot more about our clients and the problem they're facing. And then, of course, we can go back, and there can be multiple solutions to the same problem, and we just have to find what's the most optimal solution could be. See, the other aspect about building a strong product vision is also that, like, nothing is in vacuum. We are living in a competitive world. You have to know your competitors. You have to do a bit of market research. You have to understand, okay, who all are doing this, how they have done, what has worked for them, what hasn't worked for them. And you also have to strike a balance between innovation and utility. What I mean by that is, you take it too soon to the market, you might not have a good product. You wait too long, you may lose the incentive of being the first. So there is a balance that you want to strike. So there's a famous quote: "There's the wisest people who are those who learn from other success." Right. So do a bit of research, try and understand where companies have failed in past. There are tons of products who were launched for different purposes, failed, and then relaunched themselves. For example, the bubble wraps were first invented to be the wallpapers, but nobody really used it. And then IBM were launching their first personal computers, and these guys went there and offered them as a packaging material, and that's how, and since then it is there in that industry. So lots of products were launched, many failed, many passed. So we don't have to always reinvent the wheel. That's the bottom line, unless we are really building a path breaking product. Even then, there is a lot that we can learn from our competition. And the other thing is that there are tools to study competitors. There are templates available, freely available on web that you can download. You can make your own template, to be honest. Like, all you have to do is you have to just make sure that what are the most key capabilities slash features that that your customer would care about, and then see how each of the competition have it. You can make it a weighted average by putting points. Again, you can do a whole host of things, and there's enough information available in the public domain on their websites and other places that you can do that. But important thing is that we need to pay attention to what the competition is doing, where they are, what they are doing that is working well, and what they're doing which is not working so well. So moving on, once you've done the product vision, once you have kind of decided what exactly do you want to build, who do you want to build it for, what is the problem that you want to solve, then the other key instrument that we need to work on is the product roadmap. Now, product roadmap, I mean, so sometimes we just think that product roadmap is just a bunch of milestones with dates against that, but that's selling it too short. It's actually a document that lets you convey and articulate how you want to move your product strategically. What's the strategic direction of your product? And that's what a product roadmap uh, tries to do that. It lets you articulate how you will achieve or actualize the vision that you have set forth in the product vision. So before we move on with that, let's launch a quick poll. I'll request Shama if you can.
Yes, launching the poll.
All right. I think the majority believes that lack of clarity and ever-changing priorities are the biggest challenge they face during roadmap prioritization. Interestingly, almost no one believes that failing to consider the big picture is a challenge. Uh, Inadequate customer feedback is at number 2, and prioritization is driven by sales prospect is number 3. So lack of clarity and ever-changing priorities is the winner here from the poll. Okay, I think I had stopped sharing. Let me just share my screen. So we'll talk about that lack of clarity and changing priorities, right? So how do we actually actualize the vision? So some of the things that we can do is one is construct an MVP, minimum viable product. Now, an MVP is helps you initially focus on building kind of, I won't say prototype, it's much more than that, but the kind of bare minimum, which is enough to provide value, and there will be someone who would be willing to sort of uh, pay for it. So you can take it to your initial customers, your friendly clients, and then test the waters. And then you can always iterate. You can iterate and then build more features. As you learn, as you fail, you learn more, and then you can iterate and add more features and make it even better. The other important part of building a good roadmap is you define milestone. And your milestone should be quantifiable and measurable. So how would you achieve the entire vision? What are the important pillars that this will be based on? How will you achieve them? And how would you know whether you have done this? So it should be quantifiable and measurable. And the third part is very important. And it also goes into the question of lack of clarity and changing priorities. So let's spend a little bit of time on that. And that is prioritize value and not features. That's a strong statement over there. We typically tend to talk in features, work in features. Okay, these new features that we are developing in our product, these are the new things, these are the new functions that are going in this new release. We rarely talk about this is the value that we are going to deliver after our next version. And it's very important to talk in terms of the value, because at the end of the day, the most important job of a product manager is to build, is to deliver value and not build features. As we can see in the next slide, uh, we are not hired to just build more features and ship them. uh, we have to understand what is value for the customer and how we are delivering incremental value with each of our new versions of the product, or the release act, as we call it. By the way, one disclaimer I should have said in the beginning is that most of this is in the context of product management in the software industry, but one can take a lot of it applies to other areas as well. So as you can see in this slide, right, that's a very interesting one. There's a big arrow, which is the business goal, and there are smaller arrows, which are the features or the feature goals. And each feature, we need to think of them in themes. How each thing that we are delivering, how is it taking my product more towards the end state, towards the vision? How does it deliver incremental value to the client by doing this feature, and how does this fit into overall picture so that it makes the entire product more valuable? So we have to look into both things, and that's where the first option, the challenge of failing to see the big picture, was an interesting one, where that I think also is a very important consideration one has to keep in mind while trying to prioritize roadmap, build or construct the roadmap. So that's also an important thing. One another thing that interesting thing that we would like to share here is one very common reason that we hear, and this is usually our clients' favorite, whether external or internal clients, is that, hey, this will only take this much time to build, so why not just build it? And that's really two things there. First, invariably, those minor little things that seems to be not taking much time tend to add hidden complexities into the product that just keeps on growing, and it's going to come back and bite you sometime or the other. So that's one. And also, every little feature that we are building in that manner is shifting the focus away. As you can see in the second picture, that those misaligned features, how they are pointing towards different direction and not really cohesive to the rest, where rest of the product is going. So and maybe at this time I can also take that question that somebody put in the chat. Is I think there were two questions. One is, what is the difference between product vision and strategy? So it's like vision states where you want to be, maybe 2 years, 5 years, depends on the duration that you want to. Strategy tells us how would we go there, what strategy would we adopt, which markets will take, which tools we'll use to reach to our destination. So that's the fundamental difference between the vision and the strategy. And the other interesting question somebody asked, which goes back to the last example I shared about clients asking us to build more features and it takes not much time, so why not build it, is sometimes the client wants to really talk about the problem and straight away jump into the solution and gets into the shoes of the product manager, that and how do we turn that down, right? So I think the key to that is you can say no to clients, but of course you can't say just no directly. So the key to that would be trying to peel the layers and go in within that and see why is it that they're asking something, what are they getting out of it. So the questions like, hey, why do you want this feature? What are you going to do with it? What pain does this address? How does this make your process better? Or how does this helps your life, like improves your life? How does this either helps you generate more revenue or save costs or alleviate the pain of your team? Like what really it does. And as we peel those layers, we'll identify more about that problem, and that's where we'll get those answers that we can then use and push back. The other way of pushing back is that provide transparency into what you think are important, and what you think is the priority that you're working on. And if you can state that clearly, then you should be able uh, to have this conversation and navigate through this difficult conversation when a client wants to like really go into the solution zone. So we talked a lot about plan. Uh, Next, let's move on and talk a little about execution. So execution, one thing about execution is with the product management is that the product planning takes such a heavy toll, and it in itself is such a big hurdle to cross, that often the execution or preparing for execution gets neglected. I mean, if you look at this presentation, even I'm guilty of that. There are so many slides that I have on the planning and not so many for execution. But that's also because that's the nature. The better you plan, the lesser issues you'll have to deal during execution. So it's kind of goes hand in hand with that. So some few things that I want to highlight on execution. Definitely, it's about being flexible. Almost every plan that you make, uh, things will go wrong and things will not go as per plan. So we have to be adaptable to changes, and we have to be open-minded for that the changes can come. Your plans may not work exactly how you are seeing them. The other thing is, how do you know that the execution is really going the way that you want it to move ahead? So you have to think of certain ways or certain aspects that you would want to track to understand whether the execution is happening accurately or not. And there are various tools, like some people use a Gantt chart, or some people use story point, burn down. There are various ways of tracking where we are in the process, how much we wanted to achieve, and what have we actually achieved. Uh, and then you can make use of any of those tools. But important thing is that you identify and select what's going to be important aspects of the plan that you want to track as you move ahead. You also can determine the key metrics that will tell you that whether you are on track or not. For example, in in one of my previous projects, we were executing. There were, let's say, we had divided the entire thing into hundreds of tasks, and so we kind of said, oh, hey, what's one way to check whether we are executing it on track and how to communicate it. So we kind of put together something like a thermometer, where we were saying, oh, hey, here's the temperature chart. It's supposed to be 150 where we are currently. So you can define and you can find all kinds of tools and metrics that you can use to track and report your progress. Uh, The next point about the execution is something that I want to talk a little more in detail about, which is to identify the risk areas and the stress points. So risk area or stress points. I'll share an example of one of the shows that I like a lot, MasterChef Australia. In MasterChef, one of the contests is where the contestants have to reproduce a dish prepared by an executive chef. Now, this chef comes with the dish and shares the recipe with all the contestants, and then also talks about what are the stress points during making of this dish, where can things really go wrong, and which things to guard against. Now, that is that little piece of information is so crucial, and mostly the contestants who are able to manage themselves through those stress points and plan well for those stress points, like, oh, this is a delicate process, let me put some extra time for this because I want to go through this in a real calm fashion and not rush through it. Those little things, when you know what are the risk and stress points, really helps. And same goes in product management. If you understand your risk areas where things can go wrong, that's where you can plan for it, that's where you can pay extra attention on that and manage it better and mitigate your risk. And the last one is another favorite, that most of us now use scrums for software development, and we have sprints in the scrum. But the thing is that though the work gets executed in sprints, it's actually a marathon made of multiple sprints. So the planning and the execution has to be like that. The way a sprint runner train themselves, practice, prepare their mind is very different from the way a marathon runner does. And so that's another key area of execution that we must keep in mind. So that's on the execution. I'll quickly check if we have any Q&A. So one question on the roadmap is, who is the primary driver of the roadmap? If a product team builds a roadmap and client's vision for the product is different, how do you handle such arguments? So again, I think this question is more relevant when your client is maybe the sponsor of the product, or you're maybe making a tailor-made product for a particular client or a set of clients. And in those cases, again, it's a tricky situation. There's no easy answers to this. But one way to, again, resolve this is to understand why does a client why there is a difference. Like, what is it that a client is able to see that we are not able to see? Why their vision is different from ours? What value are they expecting? It could well be an expectation misalignment that we can deal with. So we have to go in depth with that and then try and understand that where there's the difference. So I think I just have to, Shama, I think there is one more slide pending.
Oh, okay. I thought you were taking the question, so I thought you were done.
No, I thought just let me check the question if there is a relevant to the topic.
Okay, sure, no problem. I'll stop screen sharing. And audience, meanwhile, please post your questions in the Q&A window. So once Uday is done with the presentation, we'll take the questions. Uday, you can share the screen.
Okay. Just give me a second. Okay, so the last bit of today's topic, the measure part. Now, in the measurement, the important thing is, first of all, we have to define what do we want to measure? How do we define product success? Success is a very subjective term, and the meaning of success is different from different individuals. It's not unusual that you will talk to different executives or people from the same firm and each will define success differently. So, but that's not how a product will work. A product manager's responsibility is to make sure that everyone comes to one common definition of what the success would look like to. And it's recommended that you have one key matrix that you will measure your product against. You can have multiple, but there needs to be something which is really the key to the core of your product. For example, for Facebook, it's number of users. For WhatsApp, it's number of sends, the forwards, the traffic. So different product, there's a different key metric. But important part is that you have one, it's simple, it's quantifiable, it's easy to measure and understand. So that's one. And second most important thing is we should measure by outcome and not by output. What I mean by that is many teams would define, would say, hey, we did these many story points, or we shipped these many features. Like those are output, but what is the outcome? Again, goes back to the value argument, is that how much value delivered. So the measurement should also be something that is somehow able to deliver the value that you want to track. And of course, there are different frameworks available for measurements. You have OKR, objectives and key results. You have managed by objectives. You have the famous Google's HEART framework. But so you can adapt any of these, whatever works for you, or you can make your own. But my favorite is OKR, and I would probably want to spend a minute on that. I got introduced to OKR recently, and since then I've started studying a bit about it, and I really was driven by the simplicity of this method. It just tells you have one objective and what are the key results. The objective is what, and key results is how. Like what is that? What's your success, and key result? How would you tell that you are now successful, right? So how we will track that. So and again, OKR was designed by John Dar, and then since then it's been adapted by multiple organizations, including Google and Netflix, highly successful. Maybe you can Google it, read about it, and see if this is something that you would like to. Again, the other great thing about OKR is not just for product, it's really for anything, including your own personal development. So those are some of the frameworks that I would recommend that you can explore and maybe adapt if it works for you. So the last slide, what are the key takeaways? Planning is a continuous process, and it's an iterative process, and it's very fundamental to product management. While planning, what not to build is as important as what to build. And lastly, if you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions that is there in the Q&A or chat. I'll stop sharing my screen. Shama, if you...
Thank you for delivering a brilliant session there. Really great insights. We have a few questions lined up for you in the Q&A window. Give me a moment to share my screen. Right, audience, yet another reminder, please ask your questions in the Q&A window, or for the LinkedIn viewers, please ask your questions in the comment section, and let's make the best of the 1 hour session that we have today. Right, so taking the question in the Q&A window, this is from Sanjay Kumar. How is a marathon strategy different from the strategy for a sprint, and how do you build it into product development process?
Yeah, so as I probably partly answered, is that the training and practice of a sprint runner and a marathon runner is different. One is about speed, and the other is about strength and durability, stamina. So the application to that in the product development process is, though you are executing and usually you will have either 1 week sprint or 2 weeks. 2 weeks is the most standard in the industry. Though you will be executing things in every 2 weeks, you have a sprint going in, maybe every 4 weeks you have a release or deadlines. The context here is that you cannot lose sight of the bigger picture. You cannot lose sight that your whole product journey is a marathon journey. It's not something that you'll build over a few sprint or few releases. It will go over a long period of time, and that's how you have to prepare, and that's how you have to plan, and that's how you even have to prioritize. So in that context, that comment was that though it's executed in sprints, it's a marathon.
Right, checking for the next question. This is the chat window, if you can see, Uday. This is from Richard. How, as a PM, do you approach changing a client's mindset if they are firm in their belief or their proposed solution being the right one?
Yeah. Approach changing a client's mindset. It's not easy to change anyone's mindset, let alone the mindset of the person who's actually paying you. So it is a difficult task. But I think one thing is that eventually, and it also goes a long way about trust. So if I assume that in your scenario, you're working with client over a longer period of time, once you win the trust, once you establish your credibility, this conversation becomes much easier compared to in initial days. And once you have that, then you can really engage with the client to explain your viewpoint, to explain and understand where they're coming from. And also, see, there's not that the client wants a particular approach just because they want it. Mostly because there is a fundamental rooted belief that is there. So if we try and understand that, that's our best chance of trying to change that mindset or agreeing the client to at least try for a different approach. So that, I think, would be my answer to that. But definitely that's one of the biggest, one of the big challenges. I'm just going through.
So there's this question in the initial stage itself by Amit. How does product vision differ from product strategy?
Yeah, I think I answered that, but in short, a vision tells you where you want to be after a particular period of time, in a particular time frame, and a strategy really defines the ways how you'll reach there. There's one more question.
There's another question in the Q&A window by Kiran.
Yeah.
To give an example, while working on the product development, everything was done and we are almost at 70% development stage. And then we realized we missed important regulatory requirement or an audit gap. How do we deal with a situation like this as we need to go now to the beginning? Maybe a real life example you encountered will help.
Yeah.
Great question, Kiran.
So I'm thinking of real life example. See, there will always be such situation, and there can be, and again, it also depends on the kind of product. For example, if you're dealing with products that helps client deal with regulatory requirements, the amount of changes is a lot. But the core of that goes into the way you have structured your product. You have to anticipate some of these things. You have to anticipate, for example, let's say, take an example of a regulatory product that you want to build. Now you understand that the regulations will change, and you cannot preempt those changes. You cannot anticipate how they will change. So one thing you can do is you build maybe your data structure, or you build your product in such a manner that you have flexibility and room available to make those changes instead of having to go back and rewrite the entire code. So being alert to the situation that you will have to Like one of the points that I had in the execution part is that you have to adapt to changes. So the way you are designing your product will go a long way in letting you adapt to changes down the road. If you have it very rigid and things very hard coded, not very configurable, flexible, it can become even a difficult. Okay, Kiran has shared an example. Working on accounting platform for an investment manager for their trading activities. Yeah, so same thing, right? I think one is that, for example, maybe there are certain fields that were not there earlier and now they have been introduced. So how do you introduce those fields now at this stage of the time where you already mentioned 60% development is done? But the answer again lies to being open to those situations while you are designing your product, while you are at the drawing board, that how you can design something with flexibility, anticipating that you may have changes and where you can have changes is also a key to this. I'm sorry, Kiran, I don't have a example on top of my head that I can share with you that I have dealt with in past, but that's how the general framework that I would advise.
I think we're good with the questions, Uday. And audience,
Okay.
if you have any more questions, please let us know. We still have 5 more minutes. Now, meanwhile, we can go to the next part of the session, Uday.
Yeah.
Okay, 1 second. Right. A reminder to the audience, please scan the QR code to get an exclusive 30-minute session with industry practitioners like Uday to clear all your doubts and transitioning to a product manager role or any coaching that you need. So for the exciting part for which our attendees are waiting, Uday, please help us pick the champion of curiosity, the best asked question in tonight's session. You can check the questions in the Q&A window in the answer section. These are the ones we took, and there is one question in the chat window as well by Richard. Audience, while Uday picks the best question, please go ahead and let us know your experience with the webinar by answering this quick poll. Let us know how we can make these sessions even more better, awesome for you. Please give us your feedback and we'll improvise accordingly.
Can I pick a question from the chat?
Yes, please.
Okay, I think I loved Sanjay's question about the marathon strategy different from the strategy of a sprint.
Sanjay Kumar, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. Sanjay Kumar, congratulations on winning the free digital course by Institute of Product Leadership. We will get in touch with you shortly with the access. Thank you, audience, for sharing your feedback with us. And thank you for participating in the question and answer section, and really intrigued questions, really great questions. Love the enthusiasm. So I come to the final part of the session, Uday. Thank you for having this presentation with us. Thank you for your time. We have enjoyed having you with us. It's been a complete pleasure. So please accept the certificate of appreciation from the Institute. The QR code on the certificate, if you scan that, it will take you to a dedicated Hall of Fame page that we have created for you. So please share it with your network and we'll share the recording on a YouTube channel.
Thanks a lot, Shaman. Thanks.
Thank you. We are grateful for the time and effort you took to share your thoughts and amazing insights drawn from your experience in the industry you live. And I'm certain that the audience will definitely benefit from the methods suggested and get ahead in their career. Great session.
Have a good day, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you. And audience, thank you for your participation. Thank you for joining in. It was great interacting with you all. Do not forget to register for the webinar tomorrow. And please fill out the feedback forms, which is in the chat window. Please take the time. It will take not more than 10 seconds. Let us know your thoughts and what your interests are, and we'll keep working on the webinars. With that note, I end tonight's session. Happy learning and stay skilled. Have a great night.